Hello and welcome to Mythic Mind Games, an extension of the Mythic Mind Fellowship, which pursues wisdom on the paths between primary and secondary worlds. I'm Dr. Andrew Snyder, and I'm glad that you're here. All right, welcome back as we continue with our Final Fantasy series, today talking about Final Fantasy V. David wasn't able to join us today. He's off on a trip, and for some reason didn't want to join us at 2 in the morning from Ireland. I'm here with Micah, and so Final Fantasy V, we've already talked about this a little bit, that there's kind of this pattern that they have going with these first set of games, where 1, 3, and 5 play around with jobs, right? Like, I mean, 1 is when it first gets introduced, it's not very malleable, but you at least get to pick what you're going to be for the entire game. And then in 3, we start to get that variability where we can switch jobs and try out some different tactics. But then 5 is just a whole new thing where they take that and now you're mixing and matching different skill sets, and there's just so much customization that goes into like how you play the game. At the same time, I would say that story takes a dip. 2, 4, and 6 are really the story-driven games. But that being said, there's still something compelling about 5. And so I guess that's my broad level comments on this game. So I know right now, Micah, you are close to the end of a playthrough. So tell me your thoughts about this game.
Yeah, so I have played Final Fantasy V fully before. It's just that was several years ago when I was in high school. So I've been replaying it recently to kind of refresh myself on it. And I remembered like thinking this was like the fun Final Fantasy, like you said, not as deep on story, but still enjoyable to play. But as I've been going back through it, I've been legitimately impressed. First of all, it is just as fun as I remember, and I think it might be, in my opinion, the most fun to play of all the Final Fantasies across the entire series. But also, like, the story has more to it than I remembered from before. I've been trying to think through like some of the themes as you go through, and it's pretty light in general. But I think what's most interesting to me about Final Fantasy V is where it sits in the course of like the whole series. Like Final Fantasy is not a continuous story between games, right? But Final Fantasy V feels like this transition nexus point in the series to where up until 5, the series was pretty lighthearted. Like even 4, when it got more in depth, it's like goofy enough that you don't take it too seriously. Um, and there's this continual theme in all the stories where it's always like you got to find the 4 crystals and do something with them. And 5, I think, is the last game that really does all of those things. Because 6, I don't even remember crystals being a thing in 6, but they were in like just about everything previous. But like the crystals are only really relevant for the first half of the story, when it feels a lot like 3, where you're just going on goofy adventure after goofy adventure and they're kind of disconnected until all the crystals are accounted for. Then the bad guy gets unleashed. And then it's like things take not a hard right turn, but it does feel like there's a big shift. So like you go, suddenly you're in a completely different world, and that world has this interesting relationship with the one you're from, to where they tried to seal up the bad guy and they were kind of kicking the can down the road in the process, and they realized, oh no, we actually have to deal with him. And they feel bad about like putting your world through a bunch of trouble. Like all the main characters deal with their fathers dying. Like that's a very recurring theme in this game of facing death. And the villain Exdeath, although he's kind of generic in some ways, like he's very in your face, and like you feel the frustration of the characters as they're dealing with him just being a jerk to them all the time. And there is a kind of sense of like the whole light and the darkness theme that the series in general likes to play with, to where it's like there's this overwhelming force that is going to destroy the world, and we feel him destroying like all the stuff we care about. And so, can we face him, deal with all the loss we're going through, and move through this? So I like how well it conveys that emotion, even though it's pretty quick and uh, not super in depth about it.
As you said, there's definitely continuity with what came before. You've got the crystal thing, but there's kind of a twist on it, where previously the crystals were corrupted, and so you have to go purify them, get rid of the fiend, and put things back in the right order. Whereas this time, the crystals keep breaking, which it's how you get jobs, so that's cool. But
Mhm.
obviously, it's not a good thing in the story. And this is where we really get some clear environmentalism coming out here. Like the fundamental reason why these crystals are breaking is because they're being utilized for industry of various kind. Like their energy is being harvested and used in order to build up the various kingdoms that are kind of really responsible for stewarding them well. And we see how this is really going to play out in, FF7, where we're extracting too much energy from the earth, and that's leading in the direction of cataclysm. And so we definitely see that working out here. And then once all the crystals break, that's when Exdeath is released. Exdeath, who like is a tree or was a tree, and then he is a tree again when you fight him in the end. Yeah, I maybe you can elucidate this a little bit. What is Exdeath as far as you understand him?
Okay, yeah, I was literally just reading up on some stuff right before I got on the call because I was like, okay, because the game doesn't really explain him super well. So as I understand it, what happens with Exdeath is like at some point in the distant past, there was some civilization that kept putting like these evil souls into this tree in the forest for some reason. I don't know why. It was like just meant to be a container for him, I guess, to keep him trapped. But all those evil souls kind of just built up over time, and then the tree itself became an evil manifestation. Instead of like sealing those souls away, it just became all of them and all of their evil combined. And so in practice, Exdeath, like he manifests as kind of a warlock, but he's kind of a Satan type character. Like all he wants to do is destroy, and just be as mean to everybody as possible. So yeah, like you said, he's a little kind of ambiguous. Like beyond that, he's not a very in-depth character. He's not as interesting. He's not as fun as Kefka, and he's not as emotionally complex as like a Sephiroth, who's just full of like all this angst. He's just like, I hate people and I want to kill the world, and that's his whole shtick.
Yeah, and I just recently finished my run of FF6, so I'll save that. But I mean, in the Kefka to Sephiroth, I mean, there's a lot of continuity there in their personality. First and foremost, perhaps, in that they have personality. Whereas Exdeath is still more of this archetypal force, which is largely what we've been dealing with so far in Final Fantasy, where even if there is some personal antagonist in the story, usually it ends up being like a force as such that you're fighting against. And that's kind of what Exdeath is. He's like the a corrupted spirit of nature, which again goes back to this environmentalism theme of when you misuse the earth, well, now the earth is going to return the favor back on you, right? It's going to become twisted. It's going to become hostile toward you. And so there's definitely that very, very archetypal theme here, which I think accounts for the fact that he has a very ambiguous kind of origin story, identity, because he's not really a person. He's more of a force as such.
Yeah.
I mean, even his name, like, Exdeath. What a name for a villain. It's a very Final Fantasy villain name. I mean, we can talk about just kind of what makes the game fun, but I mean, well, we're still sticking on story and theme. Would you say that I mean, how does this relate to what's happened so far in the major themes that we've been talking about in Final Fantasy? Would you say anything advanced? Is anything different?
Yeah, so you've already alluded to how it starts playing with environmental themes, which I don't remember if that's really come up in prior games. It may have somewhere, and I'm just forgetting. But yeah, I also thought of the Final Fantasy VII connection when I was playing through it. Interestingly, just to stick on that one for a moment. Interestingly, the environmentalist themes are not as in your face in 5 as they are in 7. Like it's very subtle. It's you have this notion, you particularly see it with, I think, the Fire Kingdom, to where they're like just trying to exploit the fire crystal as much as possible so they can somehow power a ship. Which in that world is actually a little interesting bit of world building. Like it's a big deal. They're trying to figure out different ways to power ships because they have no wind at this point, because the wind crystal has collapsed. So so it's like they're shifting to exploit different things because different parts of nature are falling apart. But like later on, like the main character Bartz, or Butts if you're going by earlier translations and trying to make jokes about it, Bartz feels some guilt on behalf of his world for exploiting the crystals, and he talks to this sage Guido, who's a turtle, who's really fun, later on about it. And Guido talks about Guido's talking about like, okay, well, Exdeath got freed, so now we have to deal with him. And Bartz is like, it's because of us, right? Because we exploited the crystals. And then Guido says something really interesting. He says something like, it's like you're it's like you're giving yourself too much credit for how this happened. He says like these were made to seal him. They were expected to break at some point. Like these things were not going to last forever. Um, and it kind of implies like the real problem is we have to figure out how to actually permanently deal with this problem and not just keep kicking the can down the road. And so that kind of shifts the focus away from environmentalism more to like we need to deal with the practical problems that are in front of us. And it does go into like you could draw some interesting inferences on that about like anthropological global warming and stuff, like how much impact do we actually have on the environment? Which I don't think the game's really trying to get you to ask those questions in depth, but it is interesting to me that it doesn't just like point the finger and say, "Hey, you messed with nature and therefore you're the bad guy," which sometimes it feels like Seven does that a little. So it's less
Yeah,
confrontational.
yeah, I think that's fair. That I mean, there's some give and take. That on one hand, there is this environmental exploitation, but at the same time, some things seem to be inevitable. Like this is
Mhm.
going to happen. Maybe we're speeding it along. I mean, I don't even know. Like when did this game come out even?
I want to
Um,
say it was like 1994 or something. I can find that really quick,
yeah,
but yeah, it was mid 90s.
yeah.
Uh,
So I mean, I again, I don't get the impression that like global warming has to be directly tied into this, but I suppose those
mhm.
conversations were definitely going on. Yeah.
It was
Um,
1992, by the way. I just found it.
okay, 92. I don't know. Where do you want to go with this?
Yeah, I don't know. That was just one of the things. Like you asked about themes in general, and that was the one my brain was thinking about. But I was looking up like because before we started this series, I tried to write down what do I think are like the overall recurring themes in the series, and I could see all of them in Final Fantasy V. Like, there's the this is not just Final Fantasy, is a common one in JRPGs, but like the themes of friendship and working together to overcome hardship, the whole light and the darkness thing that I mentioned. What does it mean to live and die? You see that in five because again, people are coping with death, both of their family and loved ones. A couple of them lose pets, and like how do we move on? The relationship between nature and technology, which is kind of what we were just discussing. Wrestling with our identity. That one's an interesting one because you see that one with Ferris, who you first meet as a pirate. And I don't know if at the time they were thinking about anything related to transgenderism or something. I tend to think they probably were not, but it's like now you would read that a little different than you might have in 1992,
Yeah,
where
I mean,
she's
I
dressed
think
up as a
that
man the whole
yeah,
time.
I definitely think if this game was being made today, that'd perhaps play out
Mhm.
a little bit differently than it did then. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know what the modern JRPG scene
Mhm.
is like in that realm. I don't know. I mean, do they tend to get really progressive, or like I don't know.
Not usually in transgenderism. Japan in general is fairly conservative
Right, that's
on
what I would
those kind
think.
of things. That's why I don't think that's what they were going for. But I think there is a
Yeah,
notion of identity in terms of like what kind of a life do you want to live, and
right.
she just happens to be dressing as a man as part of trying to do that because it's kind of like it's a man's world kind of theme going on with her, I think. So it's
Yeah,
like you
I
have to
mean,
dress up as a man to accomplish things.
yeah, I mean, initially when I was playing this game, as an American in 2025, I was like,
Mhm.
what's happening here? But yeah, I think that you're exactly right. That they're not really getting into any of that. It's just that she had to, I mean, she had to cope to survive in her environment. I just think it's kind of funny how long it takes for the characters to figure out she's a woman. I mean, it seems kind of obvious just from the sprites,
Yeah.
but yeah, so that is interesting. And then, of course, Bart's I mean, he's struggling with his own identity as he comes to understand kind of who his father is, and then of course there's is it Galuf
I
or
say Galuf, but I'm not
Galuf?
sure what the correct pronunciation is.
We'll roll with it.
Mhm.
That we get the amnesia thing again, which Final
Mhm.
Fantasy likes to play with, where he doesn't know who he is, and it's ultimately through remembering his granddaughter that he recovers a sense of identity. If I remember correctly, is it when he sees Sid and his grandson that like triggers something in him, or am I
I don't
mixing
remember
something
anything
up?
specific with the Sid meeting. I do know like there's a really interesting, like he doesn't really fully recover his memories until his daughter Kryle, like literally comes in, like crashes a meteor into the
Okay,
airship that they're on and helps.
right, because
But
he starts to get
before
like some
that,
flashbacks, but
yeah, he does have flashbacks. There's a really interesting part early on, like super early. Like you're in this cave where you encounter a siren who like
mhm,
hypnotizes everybody by showing
right.
projections of people they care about. And it shows him Kryle, his daughter or his granddaughter. But because he still hasn't recovered his memories, he doesn't know who it is, and so it doesn't affect him. And so he's able to save everybody. So his amnesia actually saves their lives, which I thought was an amusing uh, play on that concept.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that the siren could read his mind even though he couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah, it knew more than he did.
Right. Yeah, and that's a good plot mechanic because right that's why he couldn't be enchanted or bewitched by the siren because he couldn't remember. Yeah, yeah, and so and again that plays into the theme of family, of friendship, of relationships. That it is that relationship with his granddaughter that helps him to recover a sense of who he is, and then eventually he sacrifices himself, and we saw a lot of that in four. But what's perhaps unique about this is that he doesn't come back. Right? There's no miraculous recovery. He actually dies, which I don't remember. In four, doesn't everyone who dies? No, they don't all come back. But he's definitely one of the most enduring characters who dies in Final Fantasy so far. Although I feel like they kind of cheat it by his granddaughter like inherits all of his skills that he
Yeah,
has.
they become interchangeable mechanically, which
Right.
from a player's perspective is appreciated because it's really sucks to invest a lot into a character. And this game's all about investing in your characters and getting them built up in all these different classes. Just to lose all that because my character is just annoying. So I'm kind of glad they did it, even though it's really weird from a story perspective.
Right. Which again, I think goes to the idea that this game is really good on gameplay,
Mhm.
weak on story, sometimes for the purpose of enhancing gameplay. Yeah, so I don't know what is there anything else plot wise that you think we should dive into or
Yeah,
thematically?
I was trying to think. I think we've hit most of it. Like going on characters, like this isn't like so much thematic kind of thing, but I just really like the characters in this. Like, this is a surprisingly funny game, in
It
how well
is.
it's written. This is the game that introduced Gilgamesh, and
Right.
who is kind of a recurring character in later games of the series. And you meet him as like this villainous general of Exdeath's army about halfway through. And at first he looks really intimidating. He's got like all these weapons strapped to his back, and the feeling you get from him is like this is the ultimate warrior we're facing off against. But then he's just goofy as all get out. Like he randomly flees from battle because he's like, "Oh, you guys are more trouble than I thought." Later on, you fight him, and he thinks he's gotten like a legendary weapon, Excalibur, but then when he hits you with it, causes like almost no damage, and he's like, "This weapon sucks. What is going on here?" And
Right.
then
And
you
then you
beat
get it.
him. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but then you beat him and you get it, and it's called the Excalibur,
Right.
um, as opposed to the actual Excalibur that you get much later. But yeah, then he has like this falling out with Exdeath, and Exdeath banishes him to the Void, which the Void's a big deal later on in the game. But then I haven't gotten back to this in my replay, but I know like later you meet him again in the Void, and he's kind of just having all these like this existential exploration of like what he is and like what he wants to be. And he's like, "Hey, can we be friends?" And it's just like really heartwarming. And then like he sacrifices himself to help you fight like another boss because so like this evil like villainous general like somehow like he really just wants to like be the best warrior he could be and have fun doing that. And then he just wants friends. It's like he doesn't really want to be a villain. He's such a fun character. It's like I think he's one of the best things about this game.
No, yeah, absolutely, absolutely agree. By the end, he's so needy. He
Mhm.
just wants to go hang out with you. Um, and he talks about each of the main characters and like the things that make them great, the things he admires about them. And I feel like he is like such a good representation of the spirit of this game because, as you
Mhm.
said, it is very light. It's funny. Um, even though the games before this have had their light moments, they really capitalize on that. As opposed to, I would say, four tends to be a bit more on the serious side
Mhm.
overall. It tends to it tends to take itself more seriously, whereas five is just so much lighter. I feel like this
Mhm.
Gilgamesh character just really encapsulates that
Yeah.
of intensity that well becomes very much softened and given over to levity. Yeah, I very much enjoyed his character. And he returns again in some other Final Fantasies. Is that right?
Yeah, he does. I couldn't tell you what they all are off the top of my head. I want to say he appears in 12, but I haven't played 12. But I most recently saw him he shows up in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, the second of the remakes. And there's like a whole side plot with him, and he's basically the same character. Like you fight him, and then he's like, "Oh, you're more trouble than I thought you were," and then he just kind of runs away, and it's really comedic because he's this gigantic, like super warrior, like just scurrying off. And so yeah, they keep the same character. So you could tell Square knows that he's a really fun character, and so they just like to reuse him when they can.
Yeah, even in Tactics, there are at least some Easter egg references to him. Um, cool. Yeah. Anything else from five?
Yeah, I was trying to think because like you and I have both said like the game is generally lighthearted, but it does get surprisingly dark at times. I think one of the more emotionally like significant moments, like it's one I remembered from when I was younger, and I just played through the scene again. I was like, this was actually pretty well done. It's like after there's this interesting thing that happens where Exdeath like forces like these two worlds to merge back together because apparently that they originally like overlaid on top of each other, so that he can like access the void. And then once you go back, you meet him again, and he starts accessing the void, which is basically a way of generating black holes. And he just goes and starts wiping out a ton of villages, like all of a sudden. And like the main characters have like watch from their airship as he does this, and he wipes out multiple people's hometowns. And when he wipes out Bartz's hometown, like you really feel it because when you visited that earlier in the game, it felt very emotionally significant for him. You got flashbacks to his parents, his old friends. He went to visit his mom's grave. And it has like, there's a unique music track that plays in that village that's really memorable. And so when he wipes that out, like you kind of feel it. And Bartz gets mad, like just the one of the maddest scenes I've ever seen from a protagonist. Like he yells like X death stop, and like he gets to the wheel of the airship, and he just like flies it like kamikaze around the world, like just yelling like how mad he is, and the others have to come in and calm him down. And that's when you start like pulling together in the final act to try to get all the stuff you need to go face him. But yeah, like when you play that, you're like, yeah, Bartz, I'm with you. I'm mad. Let's go get this guy.
Yeah, and that right there, that whole void concept, it is a really call back to, I mean, all the way back to one, with you're fighting chaos. Now you're fighting the void. It's kind of the same sort of thing, right? The formless and the void. That's what chaos is that which is out of order. And so you have now Exdeath gaining the power over chaos, and so it's the same basic idea playing out here again. But also we get this cosmic devastation that's going to play out again in six and in some subsequent titles, where you really feel like the enemy's winning.
Mhm.
In a very strong way, that kind of way that as Bart's experiences, it gives you that sense of despair. That at best you have hope against hope, and that is something that I very much appreciate. And we've talked about this briefly before. This idea that like it doesn't look like the good guys are going to win, but we're just going to keep on going anyways. It's the same reason why I like Tolkien, same reason why I like the Northern Tales in general. We definitely see that playing out here, that I'm going to keep going, even though it looks like we're going to lose. That doesn't matter because, well, what else do we have? And so you get that endurance and hope, as well as just that sense of devastation. And so I do feel like that they handled that pretty well in this game, that for a game that tends to be more lighthearted.
Mhm. Yeah, and that kind of like what you alluded to, that's what I was kind of talking about there earlier, where it feels like it's kind of a transition point for the series. It's like you can almost see like the switch flip when it goes from like classical, like earlier in the series, kind of like let's go find the crystals, beat the villain, to like we have some more melodramatic things we want to play with. And then like six is where it fully invests in that. Six is just a very melodramatic game, and it does the destroy the world thing much further than five goes, which we'll talk about that more when we talk about that game. Seven is also pretty melodramatic. Eight I haven't played, but I get the impression it's pretty melodramatic. Nine is more closer to classic Final Fantasy, but still like it's still kind of in that new mold, and it kind of just keeps going in that trajectory, um, where they were really focused on story and presentation. And one thing, like, because I think about this sometimes with the Final Fantasy series, is sometimes I feel like the series gets a little pretentious. Um, but five is still in an era where it does not feel pretentious at all. It feels like, hey, we're just here to like have a fun game and maybe tell kind of a neat little story with some ideas we're playing with along the way. Later games, sometimes it feels like they got a little too proud of themselves and like thinking they had something profound to say, where I'm like, it's not that profound, guys. But five has no pretension there. It's just like, hey, we're just having fun here.
Yeah, and that's a good point. That whether we're talking about Final Fantasy or novels or whatever, when someone's trying to be deep and profound, they're typically not going to be deep and profound.
Yeah.
Like the way that you really achieve profundity is by just setting out to tell a good story, by not taking yourself seriously. That allows your world to actually be more serious, more artistic. It doesn't even have to be high art, but like, like I said in five, that they're not taking themselves that seriously. And in so doing, they actually, I mean, now that we keep talking about it more, I mean, they tell a decent story. It's not a complicated story.
Mhm.
It is, I would say, fun first and foremost, but like there is like there's some virtue here. There's some wisdom here. There's something worth, I mean, extracting and having a conversation about. Um, and so yeah, that's a good point. Um,
Yeah, as I was saying like before we started, like I think I'm like one of the bigger Final Fantasy V defenders in our group. And really five is kind of one of the neglected games of the series, right? Because we did get it early on in America, and so we don't have that really any real nostalgia about it. And like you said, it's not as story focused as others, and people tend to remember the stories for Final Fantasy a little more. But yeah, five had a big impact. I know in Japan, like they list it as like one of their favorite games over there. And it does have kind of a cult following. Like I know there's like this yearly like charity event, which I don't know if it's still going on. I think it is, like called like Board Job Fiesta, where the idea is like people will vote on like uh these different player combinations of jobs, and someone has to go in and go play through the entire game using exactly those jobs and never changing. Um, and it's kind of a game that's like fun to do that way. So there is kind of it's like it's not widely as loved as the other games, but like there's people like me, I guess, who really love this specific one because it's doing really unique, fun things.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that this is the one Final Fantasy that I've played so far in this run
Mhm.
where as soon as I finished it, part of me wanted to go back and play it again, just because, it is so fun just to experiment with totally different tactics. I mean, in three, when you could change your jobs, it seemed pretty clear that they were setting you up for like certain combinations at certain times. Whereas five, I mean, obviously sometimes certain combinations will work better, but there's so much more versatility in just playing the game how you want to play the game. Um, when I look forward I keep talking about tactics in the Discord, but once you get there, I'm interested to hear your thoughts because it very much takes the job system of five and just it puts that on steroids with how much you can customize things, and that really just does make for a much more I guess sub-creative kind of gameplay where you get to decide what kind of characters you have, what kind of party you have, and that allows a bit more investment, even if the characters you don't necessarily investing as much in, you're getting more invested. And I think that there's definitely some gameplay value in that, and I definitely understand why it would be a favorite.
Yeah, it does feel like they're definitely trying to take the ideas from three specifically and flesh them out more. Three like had cool ideas that weren't fully baked. Like there were a couple of problems in how it did its job system. One is that the it didn't do much to encourage you to change jobs, except by some jobs just being better than previous ones. So like the jobs you get early on, you're not really supposed to use later on. I think in the later versions, like the Pixel remaster we played, they tried to balance that out a bit so the early jobs were more viable. But by the time you get like ninja is one of the file classes, like that's meant to be like an in-game class, like everybody's just gonna be ninjas. Five, though, they're like, we're going to make everything work and we're going to have a ton of jobs. And the best thing I think they did was they made it so you learn skills from some jobs that can then be attached to other jobs when you set to them. So it's like I can have a summoner that also uses white magic. I can have a mystic knight that can steal, that sort of thing. And so there's all these different ways to mix and match different abilities. And although Final Fantasy itself kind of got away from this mostly, except for like Final Fantasy Tactics or things like that when they brought back job systems in some fashion, usually they would have characters locked out of jobs. There is like a branch of RPGs that came out of this design concept, which I think started with the DS game Four Heroes of Light, to where they really wanted to do like Five's job system again. And then later on, they went and made Bravely Default, which also kind of follows that Five's systems. And more recently, Octopath Traveler is a recent one, which is a really weird name. But that one, although it's not exactly like Five's kind of system, it does have this notion of like everybody is like identified with a job, but then they can learn stuff from other jobs, and so you can still mix and match. So although Final Fantasy itself has not done like a ton more with like interchangeable jobs, like there's plenty of other Square series that clearly are spinning off of that concept. So there's different heritage there.
Yeah. And at some point I'll branch into other JRPGs, but I just haven't made it there yet. Um, well, I figured this would probably end up being a bit of a shorter conversation, but I mean, is there anything else from Five? I know I appreciate you that you're really carrying this. I just don't have a whole lot to
I
say
just
about
love
it,
this
but
game. Like this is the one I
I'm
have the most to
glad.
say about.
That's very helpful. Is there anything else that you feel like we should discuss?
Um, I think like one thing I was thinking about, and I don't know like how much there is to go into this, but when we were talking about like Exdeath coming from a tree, like it occurred to me like there's a lot of like mythology and like fantasy stuff that revolves around trees. Like, have you come across that much, Andrew? Like, I don't know if Tolkien was ever as much of a tree guy.
I mean, well, I mean, somewhere early in, right? You got the trees of Valinor. So I mean, there's that. Of course, you've got ents and the forest have some kind
Mhm.
of sentience
That's
to
true.
them, and even I guess this potential tied to Exdeath themes. I mean, like the nature itself could become corrupted and twisted and turned against what is good and those who are trying to do good, or even the mountain itself was working against the fellowship because it was just something about nature itself was corrupted. And so yeah, we could definitely see that. And as far as the tree theme, I mean, obviously in various mythologies,
Mhm.
trees are significant, the Yggdrasil or whatever. Um, and so yeah, I mean, I guess that there is a pretty large tradition of tree importance that we can pull in here.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I don't know totally what to dig into that. It's just like that got me thinking about it. Like I think of like what was it the Norse who had Yggdrasil,
Yeah.
like the world tree or something? That I know is like a major one you see in a lot of RPGs play with that one. I don't know that X stuff really comes out of that though, but
I
I think
mean,
it's closer to like a dark int, like what you were talking about.
I mean, I suppose, I mean, a tree itself is a symbol of natural life, which is why it plays into so many different mythologies and fantasy uh, tropes or kind of archetypes. In that it is a tree itself is sort of an archetype as this the life that grows, that protrudes out of nature, that which is the world's soul, so to speak. And so that it kind of makes sense that we could also play around with the idea of what happens when life is corrupted to the point where that which should symbolize life now gets inverted to symbolize death, right? And so X death is an inversion of what nature is supposed to be.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. I feel like that could be arguably like something they thought of in the themes,
Mhm.
since it is like there is very much a death versus life and oblivion versus reality kind of thing. And so
Mhm.
yeah, that kind of inversion and that perversion of what is meant to be good does make some
Mhm.
sense there. And yeah, he also carries the satanic notion if he comes to kill and steal and destroy, right? Because that's what he's doing like the whole time. Um, so what was your favorite combination of jobs when you played it? I don't know how long it's been since you've gone through it.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I mean, I mean, obviously the most effective is the jobs you get at the very end. Yeah, as you said, like the ninja and the what's it? It's like some kind of what are the last jobs you get?
Well, three was the one where Ninja was the last. I think
Oh,
five
maybe
gives you
I'm thinking
Ninja
of three.
relatively early. I want to say it's like a third crystal.
Okay,
Samurai
maybe
you
I'm
actually
thinking of
get
three.
later.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I honestly I don't remember. So what were yours?
So for me, like I'm not quite at in game, so I'm still like running around the different ones. But I think right now, because I've got like some super sword that like if you don't run away much during the game, pro tip, if you play the game for the first time, don't run away ever from battle, and then later on you'll get a sword that will be obscenely powerful if you've never run away from battle. So I've got that one, and I think like that can only be equipped to the knight. So even though that's like one of the starting ones, like I have it on that with like two-handed, so it just causes tons of damage. I think I have like a summoner white magic user, um, and the the geomancer is really fun, and I wish it was more useful than it is. So I don't get as much use out of that. I'm trying to build up my blue mage, so I've got I guess we'll just say a blue mage in there, and and then like a either one that like flips between black mage or a white mage and has time magic. Time mage was a really interesting class that they had in here, where they were like, let's break out this magic that usually was associated with, I guess, a mix of light and dark, and then make that its own magic type. So that's where like haste and um, teleport and things like comet go.
Right.
So they were trying to subdivide it further to make more interesting combinations.
Also, one thing that I enjoyed, I think it was the thief that could do that attack where they do like four attacks in a row. And so I would give that to a ninja who is already dual wielding. So then you just keep slicing and dicing. So that was a fun little cheat move. Um, yeah. Yeah, I just can't remember specific details.
Yeah, that's part of the fun, right? Is finding these broken combinations of things.
Right.
And I know like one of the things you're supposed to do is like once you've mastered enough classes, you reclass someone into Freelancer, which is
Right.
fully customizable. Like you can access all the weapons and abilities of everything, and you get to attach like whichever two abilities that you want to it.
Right.
So yeah, it's super flexible if you put the time into it.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a lot of fun. Um, Now, was this one ever like remastered into any other like ports or anything?
Well, there was the version I originally played, which was the GBA version. So that's
Hmm.
still
Yeah.
essentially the Super NES game, but they had, I think, four extra bonus classes in that version only that you could get at the very end. I don't remember what they were. I would say one was like pirate or something, um, or like cannoneer or something like. So I kind of want to go back and check that version because it's like, how interesting were those drops? I don't actually know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not gotten anything like 4 did to where like there was like a DS 3D remake of that
Mhm.
one. They never got to that with 5. So they kind of stopped at that one, but it'd be cool to see a remake of it. I don't know that I want like a Final Fantasy 7 remake kind of situation, but like do it like HD 2D style or something. And I think people would enjoy this. Like Octopath's popular and it's got the job thing going on, so I think they could make it work.
Yeah, definitely. Um, well, I don't know that I have much else. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, I think we've gone through most of my thoughts, but yeah, it's just like Final Fantasy V. It's like it's very under. I don't know if I would say underrated, but it's like underappreciated. I feel in the series. Like if you just want like just a fun JRPG, it's like one of the best ones in that category.
Yeah, definitely. And I would definitely recommend that people pick it up if you haven't already, or return to it if it's been a while. It is. It's a lot of fun. I think that even though I prefer six, like we're talking about next time, for the story, I agree that out of 1 through 6, 5 is definitely just the most fun to play. So definitely recommend that. All right, well, Micah, I appreciate you really carrying this conversation. I look forward to next time when we get back into a real focus on the story with 6, and I think we'll probably have a couple additional people join us for that one. All right, so thank you, and I'll see you then, or if not, maybe on the next Star Wars
See
conversation
what
as well.
happens.
All right, we'll talk to you then. Thanks. All right, thank you for listening or watching if you're over on YouTube. If you appreciate the things that we do over here at Mythic Mind, then I welcome your support at patreon.com/mythicmind. Any level of support will provide you with full Discord access, so that way you can join us on the insider conversations. You can join these conversations over here as we talk about games, or over on the movies podcast, or if we have something special going on the main Mythic Mind podcast, you're welcome to join those if you are a patron. Oh, and as a reminder, if you're listening to this shortly after it comes out, then next week we are starting our course, our study on the Elder Scrolls and philosophy. I think it's really going to be a good time. It's definitely going to be a fun time, and I hope that you'll be joining us for that. All you need to do is to head over to patreon.com/mythicmind, or click that link in your show notes. Sign on as a Tier 3 patron. Whether you pay monthly or annually, sign on as a Tier 3 patron. And once you do that, then you'll be able to access the pinned post over on Patreon, which has a link to the course. And so I hope that you will consider doing that. And again, that is starting imminently, so go ahead and become a patron if you would like to join us. Now, if you're going to continue listening on the freebie feed, then make sure that you're also subscribed to the main Mythic Mind podcast, where I'm currently doing a series on the fiction and philosophy of C.S. Lewis, as well as Mythic Mind movies and shows, where we're doing a Star Wars series that'll take us through the end of 2025. And then, of course, sub to this show, and next week we'll be looking at Final Fantasy VI. Now, the next thing to come out from Mythic Mind will be over on the main Mythic Mind podcast as we continue through C.S. Lewis's Till We Have Faces. Go become a Tier 3 patron today so you can join our conversations in Tamriel. But that's it for now. Until next time, Godspeed.